Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku was mentored by Ingenium from day 1 and Izuku befriends Tenya Iida? Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The world was unfair. Izuku Midoriya had learned this truth at the age of 4, and at the age of 14, he was still learning new, painful variations of it. It was a Tuesday afternoon in Mizurufu, the kind of day that felt heavy with humidity and unfulfilled potential. The sky was a bruised purple, threatening rain that refused to fall, trapping the heat of the city against the asphalt. Izuku sat on a park bench, the metal slats digging into his thighs, his yellow backpack slumped beside him like a tired companion. In his hands he held the charred remains of his Hero Analysis for the Future number 13. The edges were singed, the cover marred by the explosive palm print of Katsuki Bakugo. If you want to be a hero that badly, there's a quick way to do it. Take a swan dive off the roof and hope for a quirk in your next life. The words echoed in Izuku's skull, bouncing around with the same violence as the explosion that had ruined his notebook. He traced the burnt cardboard cover with a trembling thumb. He shouldn't be here. He should be walking home. He should be smiling for his mother. I should be realistic, Izuku whispered to the empty park. He opened the notebook. The pages were damp from the koi pond he'd fished it out of, the ink running in rivulets of blue and black. It looked like the heroes on the pages were crying. 10 months. The entrance exam for UA High School was 10 months away. It was the deadline he had set for himself, the event horizon of his entire life. If he couldn't get into UA, the dream was over. But how? How could a quirkless boy with no muscle, no combat training, and a reputation for being a Deku hope to stand alongside giants? He wasn't All Might. He wasn't even a minor leaguer. He was a footnote. Boom! The ground shuddered. Izuku's head snapped up. The vibration traveled up his legs, rattling his teeth. It wasn't thunder. The sound was too sharp, too percussive. It was the sound of impact, instinct. A traitorous thing that had never learned to accept his powerlessness seized him. Before his brain could process the danger, Izuku was shoving the damp notebook into his bag, slinging it over his shoulder, and running toward the noise. The intersection of Tatooine shopping district and the main thoroughfare was a war zone. Police tape was already being strung up, the yellow ribbons fluttering like frantic birds. A crowd had gathered, that peculiar mix of terrified civilians and excitement-hungry onlookers that always formed around villain attacks. Izuku weaved through the mass of bodies, muttering apologies, ducking under elbows and peering over shoulders until he reached the front line. Stay back! It's too dangerous! A uniformed officer shouted, waving his baton. Izuku ignored him, his eyes locking onto the center of the chaos. A villain stood atop an overturned delivery truck. He was a wiry man, dressed in a suit that looked like it had been stolen from a flashier, richer man. His skin had a sheen like polished chrome, and floating around him were 6 metallic spheres, each the size of a bowling ball. Stay back, or I start playing pinball with the architecture. The villain screamed, his voice high and scratchy. That's Ricochet, Izuku muttered, his breath hitching as his analytical mind booted up, overriding his fear. B-list villain. Quirk. Kinetic rebound. He can control the trajectory of any object he touches, amplifying its velocity with each bounce. He usually operates in the outer districts. Why is he in the city center? Because he's desperate. A voice beside him shouted. It was Death Arms. The pro-hero punched his massive fists together. Surrender now, Ricochet. You've got nowhere to run. I don't need to run. I just need to bank the shot. Ricochet laughed. He slapped one of the metal spheres. Crack! The sphere shot forward, moving faster than the eye could track. It hit the pavement, bounced at a 90-degree angle, smashed into a lamppost, bending it in half, ricocheted off a storefront window, shattering the glass, and slammed into Death Arm's chest. The hero was lifted off his feet and thrown back into a parked sedan, groaning in pain. Too slow! Ricochet cackled. He slapped 2 more spheres. Ping ping crash. Kamui Wood swung in from the left, attempting to bind the villain with his lacquered chain prison, but the spheres were chaotic. They bounced off the asphalt, the walls, the the cars, creating a web of high-velocity destruction. One sphere clipped Kamui's arm, splintering the wood and forcing him to retreat. The geometry, Izuku whispered, his eyes darting back and forth. It's not random. It looks chaotic, but he has to calculate the angles. He's using the environment. Izuku pulled out his damp notebook, flipping to a dry page near the back. His pen flew across the paper. Sphere velocity, approximate 120 km per hour initial, accelerating by 10% per impact. Limit 6 spheres. Currently 3 active. Weakness, he has to touch them to impart the initial kinetic charge. Once they stop, he has to retrieve them. He's pinned them down, Izuku realized, horror dawning on him. Death Arms is too slow to close the gap. Kamui Woods needs a clear line of sight. Backdraft is busy with crowd control. If Ricochet decides to target the support pillars of the monorail overhead, Izuku looked up. The monorail track ran directly over the intersection. A train was approaching. Ricochet's eyes darted upward. He grinned. Jackpot. The villain reached for the remaining 3 spheres floating near his waist. He's going to bring the track down. Izuku screamed, though his voice was lost in the cacophony of sirens and panic. The heroes were regrouping, but they were hesitating. They were waiting for an opening that wasn't coming. They were playing checkers while Ricochet was playing 3D billiards. Think, Izuku. Think. The spheres were bouncing in a pattern. A perimeter defense. Floor, wall, lamppost, truck. Floor, wall, lamppost, truck. He's protecting his blind spots, Izuku mumbled, the world around him narrowing down to vectors and angles. He's counting on the heroes charging in a straight line. But if someone came from a vertical angle, no, Kamui tried that. He needs to be hit from a trajectory that disrupts the geometric sequence. Suddenly, a high-pitched whine cut through the air. It sounded like a jet engine, but deeper, throatier. Coming through. Make a hole. The voice was amplified, booming from down the street. The crowd parted as a blur of white and dark blue shot past them. It was moving so fast the wind pressure knocked the police tape flat against the ground. It's Ingenium! Someone shouted. Izuku's heart hammered against his ribs. Ingenium. The turbo hero. Rank 65, but rising. Known for his speed, his charisma, and his team of sidekicks in the Hosa district. What was he doing in Muzurifu? The armored hero drifted around the corner, sparks flying from his metallic boots as he skidded to a halt 10 meters from the chaos. His engine mufflers, 6 protruding pipes on his back, were smoking. Looks like a traffic jam, Ingenium announced, his helmet's visor glowing a soft blue. Need a hand, gentlemen? He's got projectiles. Death Arms yelled, clutching his bruised ribs. Don't engage directly. He'll tear your armor apart, Ricochet sneered. Another tin can? Let's see how you handle the curveball. He slapped a sphere. It rocketed toward Ingenium. Tenya Iida didn't flinch. He engaged his engines, a burst of orange flame erupting from his back. He sidestepped the sphere with a grace that belied his bulky armor, the metal ball whizzing past his ear. Fast, Ricochet admitted. But can you dodge 3? He launched 2 more. Now 5 spheres were bouncing around the intersection, turning the street into a deadly pinball machine. Ingenium was fast, incredibly fast, but the environment was working against him. The street was narrow, cluttered with debris. He couldn't reach top speed. He was forced to dodge, weaving through the chaotic web of bouncing metal. I can't get close. Ingenium shouted over his comms. The Ricochet angles are getting tighter. He's boxing me in. Izuku watched, his hands gripping the police tape. He saw it. He saw the pattern closing. He's hurting him, Izuku realized. He's forcing Ingenium to the left, toward the overturned truck. The moment Ingenium commits to that turn, sphere number 4 will rebound off the fire hydrant and hit his exhaust port. It was a math problem. A deadly, high-speed math problem. And the heroes were getting the answer wrong. No! Izuku screamed. He didn't mean to move. He really didn't. But his legs, those damn treacherous legs, were moving again. He ducked under the tape. Kid! Get back! A policeman yelled. Izuku scrambled onto the hood of a parked taxi to get a vantage point. He cupped his hands around his mouth. Ingenium! The sound of his own voice shocked him, cracking with puberty and terror. The turbo hero, currently wall-running along the side of a building to avoid a sphere, glanced down for a fraction of a second. Right flank. 45 degrees. Izuku shrieked, pointing frantically. The fire hydrant. He's banking it off the hydrant. Tenya Iida was a professional. He had been a hero for years. He had instincts honed by hundreds of arrests. But more importantly, he was a man who knew how to listen to his pit crew. When a voice shouted a warning with that much conviction, you didn't question it. You reacted. Ingenium was about to break left. Instead, he slammed his heels into the brick wall, shattering the masonry, and blasted his engines in reverse. Clang! A split second later, a silver sphere slammed into the exact spot where Ingenium's torso would have been. It ricocheted off the wall and smashed into the fire hydrant, shearing the top off and sending a geyser of water into the air. Ricochet's eyes widened. What? The water! Izuku yelled, his mind racing faster than it ever had in the classroom. The water reduces the velocity. The spheres lose momentum in the liquid. Ingenium landed in a crouch, water raining down on his armor. He looked at the geyser, then at the villain. Well, the hero quipped, his voice amplified. Looks like it's time for a car wash. Tensei didn't run at the villain. He ran at the water. With a roar of his engines, he sprinted through the geyser. The high-pressure water coated his armor. As the spheres came at him, he didn't dodge. He spun, using the centrifugal force of his turn to slap the wet spheres away with his armored gauntlets. The water acted as a dampener. When the spheres hit his wet armor, they didn't ricochet with explosive force. They skidded and lost spin. My spin! Ricochet panicked. You ruined the spin, and now I'm ruining your day. Ingenium shouted. He burst out of the mist, closing the distance in a heartbeat. Recipro extend. A leg fueled by high-octane torque swung around. It connected with the side of Ricochet's head with a sound like a shotgun blast. The villain spun in the air, ironically, a perfect pirouette, before slamming into the pavement, unconscious. Silence descended on the intersection, broken only by the hiss of the broken hydrant and the cooling ticks of Ingenium's engines. Izuku stood on the taxi hood, his chest heaving, his face flushed. He felt lightheaded. The adrenaline was draining away, leaving behind a cold wash of terror. I interfered. I got in the way. I could have gotten him killed. The crowd erupted into cheers. Ingenium! Ingenium! Tenya Iida stood up, shaking the water off his armor. He gave a thumbs up to the crowd, flashing a dazzling smile beneath his visor. He spoke briefly to the police, handed the unconscious villain over to death arms, and then he turned. The blue visor locked onto the boy standing on the taxi. Izuku froze. Oh no. He's going to scold me. He's going to arrest me for vigilantism. I'm done. Yui will never take me now. Ingenium engaged his thrusters, not for a sprint, but for a gentle glide. He covered the distance to the taxi in seconds, landing softly on the pavement beside it. He was tall, intimidatingly so in the armor, but his posture was relaxed. Hey, Ingenium said. He reached up and unlatched his helmet. With a hiss of depressurization, the helmet came off, revealing a young man with dark blue hair, glasses, and a face that was surprisingly kind. He looked tired, sweat matting his bangs to his forehead, but his eyes were bright. You're the one who called the shot, right? Tensei asked. Izuku gripped the straps of his backpack until his knuckles turned white. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interfere. I just saw the angle and I thought, whoa, easy there, Turbo, Tensei laughed, raising a hand. I'm not here to write you a ticket. I'm here to say thanks. That was a nasty setup. If I'd zigged instead of zagged, I'd be picking shrapnel out of my spine right now. Izuku blinked. You would? Definitely. That guy was banking shots off surfaces I wasn't even tracking. But you were. Tensei leaned against the taxi, looking at Izuku with genuine curiosity. How'd you do it? Some kind of sensory quirk? Probability prediction? Or maybe you see vectors? The question hit Izuku like a physical blow. The shame returned, hot and familiar. Izuku looked down at his red shoes. the oversized red shoes that were a telltale sign of his genetic makeup. I don't have a quirk, the silence stretched. Izuku waited for the pity. He waited for the "oh really? Well, stay safe, kid" that always followed. He waited for the hero to lose interest and walk away. No quirk? Tensei repeated. No, sir. I'm quirkless. Izuku forced the words out. I analyze heroes. And villains. I write notes. I saw the pattern he was using. It was just geometry. Tensei looked at the boy. He saw the trembling hands, the nervous sweat, the oversized uniform. But he also saw the eyes. Green, intelligent, and desperately hungry for a purpose. Tensei laughed. It wasn't a mocking laugh. It was a bark of genuine delight. Just geometry, huh? Tensei tapped the side of his own head. Kid, you processed the dynamic battlefield, calculated the trajectory of a ricocheting projectile, predicted the villain's trap, and communicated the counter-strategy to me in under 3 seconds. And you did it without a computer. Tensei pushed off the car and stood to his full height. You've got an engine in your head, kid. And honestly? That's faster than most of the guys I work with. Izuku looked up, stunned. I do? Speed isn't just about legs, Tensei said, patting the bulky armor on his thigh. These things? They're just pistons. They push me forward. But if I don't know where I'm going, I'm just a missile with a bad guidance system. Today, you were my guidance system. Tensei pulled a small business card from a compartment in his armor. It was sleek, silver with blue lettering, Team Iida Tokyo Office. What's your name? Midoriya. Izuku Midoriya. Well, Midoriya-kun, Tensei handed him the card. I'm in town for a few months. Family business. Dealing with my little brother, actually. He's a bit stiff, needs to loosen up before high school. But I'm also looking for local talent. Support, logistics, strategy. Not necessarily sidekicks in tights, but the people who make the heroes win. He looked Izuku in the eye. You want to be a hero, right? That's why you ran toward the explosion. Yes, Izuku whispered. More than anything. But you're stuck, Tensei guessed. No powers. People telling you to quit. Izuku nodded, tears pricking at the corners of his eyes. I can't give you a quirk, Tensei said softly. But I can teach you how to move. I can teach you how to use that brain of yours to run circles around guys who think power is everything. I can teach you the Iida family style, reciprocity. You give it everything you have, and you get speed in return. Tensei grinned, a reckless, infectious expression. You busy tomorrow after school? The walk home was a blur. Izuku felt like he was floating. He clutched the silver business card in his pocket, as if it were a winning lottery ticket. Ingenium wants to train me. Not All Might. Not the symbol of peace. But a top-ranking pro-hero, a man who respected speed and intellect. A man who hadn't looked at Izuku with pity, but with interest. When he got home, Inko was frantic. She had seen the news. Izuku! There was a villain attack. I was so worried, I called your phone but she stopped, seeing the soot on his face and the strange, dazed smile. Izuku? Are you okay? Mom, Izuku said, his voice steady for the first time in years. I met a hero today. Inko's face crumbled slightly, the old worry lines deepening. Oh, Izuku, honey, please don't tell me you ran in there again. I did, he admitted. But I helped. I actually helped. And he offered to teach me. He showed her the card. Inko took it, reading the name Tensei Iida. Her eyes widened. The Iida family was famous. An old hero dynasty. Wealthy, respected, safe. He wants to teach you? Inko asked, her voice trembling. To be a hero? To be useful, Izuku corrected. He said I have an engine in my head. Inko looked at her son. She saw the charred uniform, the bruises. But she also saw something she hadn't seen since he was 4 years old. Hope. Real, tangible hope. She pulled him into a hug, crying, as she always did. But this time, she didn't apologize. She didn't say I'm sorry. Okay, she sobbed into his shoulder. Okay. Just wear a helmet. Please wear a helmet. The next day, after school, Izuku stood in front of a gate that was larger than his entire apartment building. The Iida estate in Mizudafu was a satellite residence, not their main compound in Tokyo, but it was still imposing. High stone walls, traditional Japanese architecture mixed with modern steel reinforcements. It screamed old money and hero legacy. Izuku checked the address on the card for the 100th time. He checked his reflection in his phone screen. He was wearing his gym clothes, the teal tracksuit that had seen better days. He looked scrawny, he looked out of place. Maybe he was joking. Maybe he just gave me the card to be nice. Maybe I should turn around. Midoriya-kun? The voice came from the intercom on the gate. Why yes. Present. Izuku squeaked, standing at attention. Come on in. The side gate is open. Head to the detached dojo in the back. Follow the sound of the engines. The gate clicked and swung open. Izuku swallowed hard, stepped through, and began the long walk up the gravel driveway. The estate was beautiful, manicured gardens flanking the path. But as he walked, the serenity was broken by a rhythmic, mechanical sound. Worklank. Worklank. He rounded the main house and found a massive, modern structure in the back. It looked like a cross between a traditional dojo and a Formula One garage. The doors were wide open. Inside, the floor was padded with high-impact rubber. There were racks of weights, treadmills that looked like they could handle a tank, and walls lined with tools and spare armor parts. In the center of the room, Tenya Iida was sitting on a bench press, spotting someone. 5 more! Come on, Tenya! Don't let the RPM drop! Tensei shouted. Under the bar lay a boy Izuku's age. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with glasses that had slipped down his nose. He had dark blue hair cut in a severe, disciplined style. His face was contorted in effort as he pushed the barbell up. Precision and discipline. The boy grunted, locking the weights out. Racket, Tensei said, guiding the bar onto the hooks. Good set. Your form is getting better, but you're still favoring your right side. Tensei looked up and saw Izuku standing in the doorway. His face lit up. Hey! The human calculator has arrived! Tensei waved him over. The boy on the bench sat up stiffly. He adjusted his glasses, turning to glare at Izuku with intense scrutiny. He wore a matching tracksuit to Tensei's, pristine and expensive-looking. Brother, the boy said, his voice loud and formal. Is this the civilian asset you mentioned? Tenya, be nice, Tensei scolded lightly, slapping the boy on the back. Midoriya, come in, come in. Don't mind the glare. He was born frowning. Izuku stepped onto the rubber mats, feeling incredibly small. Hello? I'm Izuku Midoriya. It's an honor to be here. He bowed deeply, almost headbutting his knees. Tensei laughed. Relax, kid. We're not at a funeral. He gestured between the two boys. Midoriya, this is my little brother, Tenya. He's aiming for you too. Tenya Iida stood up. He was taller than Izuku by a head. He marched over, stopped exactly 2 feet away, and extended a hand with robotic precision. Tenya Iida, he announced. My brother has spoken highly of your situational awareness yesterday. However, Tenya's eyes narrowed behind his lenses. I must express my skepticism. Heroism requires not just intellect, but physical capability. My brother tells me you are quirkless. While I respect the ambition, I fail to see how you can keep up with the rigorous training required for UA without a physical augment. Izuku flinched. It was a valid point. It was the same point everyone made. Tensei warned, his voice dropping an octave. What did I tell you about judging an engine before you hear it run? I am simply being pragmatic, brother. Tenya chopped the air with his hand. UA has an acceptance rate of less than 1%. If we are to train together, I cannot afford to be slowed down by someone who cannot. I won't slow you down, Izuku interrupted. He surprised himself. He surprised Tenya too. The taller boy blinked. Izuku looked at Tenya's legs. He noticed the slight bulge in the calf muscles, the engines. He noticed the way Tenya stood, weight distributed on the balls of his feet. You have engines in your calves, right? Izuku asked, his voice shaking but his mind engaging. Like the reciprocal burst quirk your family is famous for? Tenya puffed out his chest. Indeed. It is a noble quirk passed down. Your radiator grills, Izuku pointed to Tenya's legs. They're on the sides. Your brothers are on his back and elbows. That means your center of gravity is lower, but your cornering radius is wider. If you try to turn at high speeds like your brother, you'll stall out or strip a gear. You have to drift differently. Tenya froze. His mouth opened, then closed. He looked down at his legs. What? Yesterday, Izuku continued, gaining momentum. Your brother beat Ricochet because he used water to dampen the impact. He adapted. You're strong, Iida-kun. Stronger than me. But if you just run in a straight line, you're easy to predict. I want to learn how to not be predictable. And maybe I can help you figure out your cornering. Silence filled the dojo. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioning. Tensei grinned, crossing his arms. He looked at his little brother with a smug expression. Well? He got you there, Tenya. Tenya stared at Izuku. The skepticism in his eyes didn't vanish, but it shifted. It became something like curiosity. He pushed his glasses up his nose. Cornering radius. Tenya muttered. I hadn't considered the aerodynamic drag difference between the dorsal and crural exhaust ports. He looked back at Izuku. Very well, Midoriya-kun. I accept your challenge. But do not expect me to go easy on you just because you lack an engine. I wouldn't want you to, Izuku said. Tensei clapped his hands together, the sound echoing like a gunshot. All right, enough flirting. Let's get to work. Tensei walked over to a whiteboard on the wall. He picked up a marker and wrote a single word in massive block letters. Mobility. Midoriya, Tensei said, turning to him. Forget punching. Forget super strength. You're small. You're light. Use that. He tossed a pair of weighted bands at Izuku. The Iida family motto is simple. Be fast, be helpful, be gone. We don't stick around for the applause. We do the job and we move to the next one. Tensei pointed at the treadmill. 10 months, kid. We're going to turn you into something the villains can't catch. We're going to teach you how to drift. Izuku caught the weights. They were heavy. His arms sagged. But looking at Tensei's encouraging grin and Tenya's intense, waiting stare, Izuku felt a fire ignite in his chest. A different kind of fire than One for All, though he didn't know that name yet. This was the fire of friction. The heat of tires on pavement. Yes, sir! Izuku shouted. He strapped the weights on. The engine was starting. The smell of the Iida estate's private gymnasium was a specific cocktail of scents that Izuku Midoriya was quickly learning to associate with pain. It smelled of ozone, high-grade motor oil, antiseptic floor cleaner, and the sharp, copper tang of exhaustion. It had been 3 weeks since Tensei Iida, the turbo hero, Ingenium, had plucked Izuku from the obscurity of a villain attack and offered him a chance. 3 weeks of waking up before the sun, 3 weeks of muscles screaming in protest, and 3 weeks of realizing just how far behind he truly was. Again, Tensei's voice cut through the humid air of the gym. Izuku lay flat on his back on the blue rubber matting, his chest heaving like a bellows. He stared up at the high-vaulted ceiling, where industrial fans spun lazily. Every inch of him ached. Not the sharp pain of injury, but the dull, throbbing ache of a body being dismantled and rebuilt. Come on, Midoriya, Tensei said, clapping his hands. The villain isn't going to wait for you to catch your breath. Standard operating procedure number 1. If you can breathe, you can move. Izuku groaned, rolled onto his stomach, and pushed himself up. His arms trembled. He was wearing a gray training shirt that was already soaked through with sweat, and weighted bands were strapped to his wrists and ankles. Tensei called them gravity anchors. I'm up, Izuku wheezed. I'm up. Standing across the room, looking as fresh as a daisy despite having run 10 miles already, was Tenya Iida. The younger Iida brother was a study in contrast to Izuku. Where Izuku was scruffy, rounded, and moved with a nervous, frantic energy, Tenya was all sharp angles and geometric precision. He stood with his hands on his hips, his posture rigid, his glasses catching the overhead light. Midoriya-kun! Tenya barked, chopping his hand through the air. Your recovery time has increased by 12 seconds since the last set. This is unacceptable efficiency. If we are to aim for UA, we must operate at peak performance regardless of fatigue. Izuku wiped the sweat from his eyes. I know, Iida-kun. My lactate threshold isn't calibrated yet. Then we shall calibrate it through repetition," Tenya declared, marching over to the water station to refill his bottle with mathematical exactness. Tensei leaned against a squat rack, a towel draped over his shoulder. He wasn't wearing his armor today, just track pants and a tank top that revealed the exhaust ports embedded in his triceps. He watched the two boys with a critical, yet amused eye. "Tenya, cut him some slack," Tensei said. "You've been training since you could walk. Midoriya here has been driving a sedan his whole life, and we just dropped a V8 engine in him. He needs to break it in. A hero does not have time for a break-in period, brother," Tenya argued, though he dutifully handed Izuku a water bottle. "The entrance exam is in 9 months and 1 week. Every second wasted is a point lost on the scoreboard." Izuku took the water, bowing gratefully. "Thanks, Iida-kun. It is merely proper hydration protocol," Tenya huffed, turning away. Izuku drank, watching Tenya. Over the last few weeks, the relationship between them had been complicated. Tenya wasn't mean. He was actually incredibly polite, but he was distant. He treated Izuku like a guest who didn't quite belong in the house. There was a barrier there, built of skepticism. Tenya couldn't understand why his illustrious brother was investing so much time in a quirkless boy when there were thousands of powered kids desperate for mentorship. To Tenya, Izuku was an anomaly. A variable that didn't fit the equation. "All right, break's over," Tensei announced. "We're shifting gears. Midoriya, take off the weights. Tenya, engage your mufflers. We're doing the labyrinth." The labyrinth was the Iida family's pride and joy. The floor of the gym could retract, revealing a complex obstacle course of rising pillars, moving platforms, and tight corridors designed to test mobility. "The goal isn't speed today," Tensei instructed as the floor rumbled and transformed into a geometric cityscape of steel and rubber. "It's flow. Tenya, you have a bad habit of stopping to turn. You run like a drag racer, straight lines, hard stops. Midoriya, you have the opposite problem. You hesitate because you're overthinking the path." Tensei walked to the center of the room. "I want you both to run the course. Tenya, you're the villain. You're trying to tag Midoriya. Midoriya, you're the survivor. You don't fight him. You don't engage. You just don't get touched. If Tenya touches you, you do 50 burpees. If Tenya fails to catch you in 3 minutes, he does the burpees." Tenya's engines revved, a low, throaty purr from his calves. "Understood. I shall apprehend him with maximum efficiency." Izuku swallowed hard. Without the weights, his limbs felt strangely light, floating. "Run away. I can do that. I've been doing that my whole life." "Don't just run," Tensei corrected, his eyes sharpening. "Evade. Use the environment. Standard operating procedure number 4. The environment is your teammate. Use it. Go!" The air in the gym exploded. Tenya launched himself forward with a burst of blue flame, closing the distance instantly. Recipro burst was too dangerous for sparring, but even his base speed was terrifying. He moved like a bullet train, linear and unstoppable. "Surrender, Midoriya-kun!" Izuku shrieked and dove to the right. He scrambled up a tiered platform, his sneakers squeaking on the metal. Tenya didn't climb, he just blasted upward, landing on the platform with a heavy thud. He reached out to grab Izuku's shoulder. "Think. Don't panic. Think." Izuku dropped. He didn't jump back. He just collapsed his knees and let gravity take him, sliding under Tenya's outstretched arm. As he slid, he kicked off the wall, spinning his body around a vertical pillar. "Whoa!" Izuku gasped, stumbling as he landed. He hadn't meant to spin that fast, but the removal of the weights had messed with his proprioception. Tenya turned, his engines whining as he braked. He had to physically stop, pivot 90 degrees, and re-engage. That split second was all Izuku needed. Izuku vaulted over a railing, dropping to the lower level of the labyrinth. He remembered Tensei's lectures on parkour, or freerunning, as Tensei preferred to call it. It's about momentum conservation. Don't absorb the impact, redirect it. Izuku hit the ground, rolled over his shoulder, and popped up into a sprint. "You cannot escape justice." Tenya roared from above, jumping down. Tenya landed like a mech, heavy, solid, cracking the rubber mat. He lost all his forward momentum on impact, and had to accelerate again from zero. Izuku, meanwhile, was scrambling through a tunnel of hoops. He wasn't fast, not compared to Tenya. But he was small. He was fluid. He was used to dodging Bakugo's explosions, which required erratic, desperate movement. He's cutting the corners, Tensei observed quietly from the sidelines, arms crossed. Sloppy, but his instincts are good. He knows he can't outrun the car, so he's running through the alleyways. The chase continued. Tenya was getting frustrated. His movements were becoming jagged. He would burst forward, overshoot Izuku, skid to a halt, turn, and burst again. It was a series of violent starts and stops. Work lunk. Work lunk. Izuku could hear the rhythm. Acceleration. Coast. Brake. Turn. Acceleration. He was panting, his lungs burning, but the engine in his head that Tensei talked about was spinning up. The fear was receding, replaced by the cool, blue overlay of analysis. Iida-kun is fast. Faster than anyone I've ever seen. But he's fighting the floor. Izuku vaulted a concrete barrier. Tenya smashed through it. It was foam, thankfully, but the impact slowed him down. Got you! Tenya lunged. Izuku didn't dodge. He stopped. Tenya, expecting a dodge, had aimed wide to cut off the escape. By simply stopping, Izuku caused Tenya to fly past him, his fingers brushing Izuku's sleeve but failing to grip. Time! Tensei shouted. Tenya skid to a halt 10 feet away, his engine sputtering. He spun around, his face flushed with exertion and indignation. That was purely luck. Tenya panted, adjusting his glasses which were now askew. Izuku collapsed onto his butt, gasping for air. I think that's 50 burpees. Iida-kun. Tenya looked like he wanted to argue, but his honor code strangled the words in his throat. He stiffened, nodded sharply, and immediately dropped to the floor to begin his punishment. 1, 2, 3. Tensei walked over to Izuku, offering a hand to pull him up. Not bad, kid. You looked like a terrified rabbit, but a terrified rabbit that knows where the hole is. You used his momentum against him. He's really loud, Izuku managed to say, leaning on his knees. Not his voice. His engines. You can hear the gears shift before he moves. Tensei raised an eyebrow. Oh? Izuku nodded, his breathing slowing. He watched Tenya doing his burpees with terrifying speed and form. And there's a delay. When he turns. It's the vents. Tensei smiled, a slow, predatory smile. Why don't you tell him that? 20 minutes later they were sitting on the bench press stations, drinking electrolyte packs. The atmosphere was thick. Tenya was brooding. Losing a mobility drill to a quirkless novice was a blow to his pride that he hadn't anticipated. Izuku held his notebook, a new one, Hero Analysis, Practical Application Volume 1, and chewed on the end of his pen. He kept glancing at Tenya's calves. If you have something to say, Midoriya-kun, please say it, Tenya said stiffly, not looking up from his towel. Your muttering is audible from 3 meters away. Izuku jumped. Sorry. I was looking at your exhaust ports. The radiator grills specifically. Tenya instinctively covered his legs with his towel, looking scandalized. My radiator grills are standard Iida genetics. They are perfectly functional. No. They're amazing. Izuku waved his hands frantically. I mean, that's the problem. They're too powerful for the chassis, your frame. Tenya lowered the towel slowly. Explain. Izuku took a deep breath. This was it. This was the moment where he either alienated Tenya forever or proved he belonged here. He opened his notebook to a sketch he had made during Tenya's burpees. It was a rough diagram of Tenya's legs, with arrows indicating airflow and force vectors. Okay, so, Izuku started, slipping into his analysis mode. His voice sped up, losing its stutter. Your brother, Ingenium, has his engines on his elbows and back. When he turns, he uses his arms as rudders. He can vector the thrust to push his upper body into the turn, changing his center of mass instantly. It's like a motorcycle leaning into a curve. He pointed to the drawing of Tenya. But your engines are in your calves. The thrust is all low center. When you run straight, It's incredible because the force goes directly into the ground. Pure torque. But when you try to turn, you're top heavy. Your legs turn, but your upper body wants to keep going straight because of inertia. Tenya leaned in closer, his brow furrowed. Inertia. To compensate, Izuku continued, tapping the paper, you instinctively brake with one leg to pivot. You're stutter stepping. You lose almost 40% of your velocity in a sharp 90-degree turn because you're fighting your own momentum. And Izuku hesitated. I think the intake vents on your lateral gastrocnemius are creating drag. Drag? Tenya looked offended. I wax my armor daily. I am aerodynamic. It's not the surface, Izuku explained. It's the angle. When you flex your calf to corner, the vent opens fully to cool the engine. But because it opens outward, it catches the air. It's acting like an air brake on a plane. You're deploying a parachute every time you turn left. Tenya snatched the notebook from Izuku's hands. He stared at the diagram. He traced the lines Izuku had drawn showing the air resistance hitting the open vent. This, Tenya murmured. This creates a turbulent wake, which destabilizes my footing, forcing me to decelerate to maintain balance. He looked up at Izuku, eyes wide behind his glasses. I thought I just needed stronger ankles. You have really strong ankles. Izuku reassured him quickly. But it's a structural issue. If you adjusted your stance, maybe tilted your foot inward before the turn, the vent would be shielded by your shin guard. You'd get less cooling, so you'd run hotter, but you wouldn't lose the speed. Tenya stood up abruptly. The bench rattled. Brother! Tenya shouted. Tensei, who was pretending to read a car magazine in the corner, looked up. Yeah? I require the track immediately. I must test the hypothesis. Tenya stood at the start line of the indoor track. He vibrated with intensity. Okay, Tenya muttered to himself. Invert the foot angle. Shield the intake. Accept the heat rise. Maintain velocity. He looked at Izuku, who was standing with a stopwatch. Ready? Izuku asked. Commencing. Tenya exploded off the line. Whirr-boom. He tore down the straightaway. The first corner approached, a sharp left. Usually, Tenya would stutter step here, the screech of rubber on track echoing as he forced his body to comply. This time, he remembered Izuku's words. Shield the vent. Lean the shin. Tenya twisted his ankle inward, an awkward, unnatural sensation. But as he hit the corner, he felt the difference. The air didn't catch his leg. There was no drag. Instead of fighting the turn, he sliced through it. He maintained 85% of his speed. The G-force pressed him into the floor, but he didn't stumble. He shot out of the corner like a slingshot. Yes! Tenya roared as he crossed the finish line. 4.2 seconds. Izuku shouted, staring at the stopwatch. You shaved off 0.8 seconds on a single lap. That's huge. Tenya walked back toward them, steam hissing from his legs. His calves were glowing red-hot, and he was wincing slightly from the heat, but his face was euphoric. He stopped in front of Izuku. He towered over him, sweating and steaming. Then Tenya bowed. It was a perfect, 90-degree bow, stiff and formal. Midoriya-kun! Tenya shouted at the floor. I apologize. I questioned your utility in this endeavor. Your analysis was not only accurate but transformative. You possess a keen understanding of biomechanics that surpasses my own, Izuku flailed. Ah. Iida-kun, please raise your head. It was just a guess. I just like engines. Tenya straightened up, adjusting his glasses. A small, rare smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. You are not just a passenger, are you? You are a navigator. Tensei walked over, draping an arm around both of their shoulders, ignoring the heat radiating off Tenya. See? Tensei grinned at Tenya. I told you. He's got the specs. You're the chassis, Tenya. You're the horsepower. But power is useless if you can't control it. Midoriya here? He understands the road. Tensei looked at Izuku. And that's your style, Midoriya. Standard operating procedure number 7. Intelligence is a weapon. While they're busy trying to overpower you, you're already figuring out why they're going to lose. Izuku looked down at his hands. Hands that had never broken a board or punched a villain, but had filled dozens of notebooks. For the first time, he didn't feel like they were empty. Now Tensei clapped his hands. Tenya, cool down your engines before you melt your bones. Midoriya, 50 push-ups. Then you two are jogging home. I have paperwork to do. Jogging? Izuku squeaked. But my legs. SOP number 1, kid, Tensei winked. If you can breathe, you can move. The sun had set by the time they left the Iida estate. The sky was a deep indigo, the streetlights flickering on along the quiet residential streets of Muzurufu. Izuku and Tenya jogged side by side. It was a slow pace, a recovery run, Tenya called it, though for Izuku it felt like a normal workout. The silence between them was different now. It wasn't the awkward, judgmental silence of the afternoon. It was the companionable silence of two people who had survived a shared ordeal. Your form is terrible, Tenya said suddenly, breaking the silence. Izuku stumbled. Huh, your running form, Tenya clarified, not looking over. You pronate excessively. You are wasting energy with every step. If you keep running like that, you will develop shin splints within 2 weeks. Oh, Izuku tried to adjust his footing. I never really learned how to run properly. I usually just run away. Tenya frowned. Well, that ends today. Lift your knees higher. Strike with the midfoot, not the heel. Keep your elbows tucked. Izuku tried to mimic Tenya's robotic, perfect gait. It felt weird but lighter. Better, Tenya nodded approvingly. We must also discuss your nutritional intake. To sustain the muscle growth my brother expects, you need to increase your protein consumption by at least 40%. I like katsudon, Izuku offered Wiki. Tenya looked horrified. Katsudon? Fried pork cutlet bowl? That is a caloric bomb of saturated fats and sodium. Midoriya-kun, that is not fuel. That is recreational sludge, Izuku laughed. It was a genuine laugh, startling himself. Recreational sludge? It's delicious. My mom makes the best one. Taste is irrelevant when the engine requires premium unleaded. Tenya argued, chopping his hand as he jogged. I will draft a meal plan for you. Boiled chicken, steamed broccoli, brown rice, and calcium supplements for bone density. That sounds miserable, Izuku admitted. It sounds like efficiency. They jogged for another block. Izuku looked at Tenya. The stiff, scary boy from the entrance exam. He was just a nerd. A high-maintenance, obsessive, socially awkward nerd. Just like Izuku. Hey, Iida-kun? You may call me Tenya, the boy said, staring straight ahead. Since we are training partners, it would be inefficient to use 3 syllables when 2 will suffice. Izuku beamed. Okay. Tenya-kun. Did you know that the Turbo Hero, Ingenium's sidekick agency in Hosu actually has the highest rate of villain apprehension with 0 collateral damage in the country? Tenya's ears perked up. He slowed his pace slightly. I was aware of the apprehension rate, naturally. But the 0 collateral damage statistic? Yes. Izuku's eyes lit up. He forgot about his tired legs. It's because of your brother's catch and release strategy. Most speed heroes create sonic booms that shatter windows, but Ingenium uses a dispersed exhaust system to minimize air pressure waves in urban environments. It's actually referenced in the Heroics and Civil Liability textbook, Chapter 4. Tenya stopped jogging. He stared at Izuku. You have read the Civil Liability textbooks? Those are university-level reading materials. I read a lot. Izuku rubbed the back of his neck. I really admire your family, Tenya-kun. Your brother isn't just fast. He's considerate. He helps people without breaking the world around them. Tenya's expression softened. The rigid mask of the Iida air melted away, revealing a boy who loved his big brother desperately. He is, Tenya said softly. He is the greatest hero I know. I only hope I can live up to that legacy. You will, Izuku said with absolute conviction. You're already faster than him in the straightaways. And once you fix your cornering, you'll be unstoppable. Tenya looked at Izuku. He saw the genuine faith in the green eyes. It wasn't flattery. It was data-driven confidence. Tenya smiled. A real smile this time, showing teeth. And you, Izuku-kun, Tenya tested the first name, finding it acceptable. You will be the one who tells me where to run. Because frankly, my sense of direction is, statistically below average. Izuku laughed again. Really? I once got lost in a shopping mall for 3 hours, Tenya admitted gravely. I attempted to use the emergency exit map, but I was holding it upside down. They both broke down into laughter, the sound echoing down the empty street. Okay, Izuku wiped a tear from his eye. I'll navigate. You drive, agreed. Tenya checked his smartwatch. Now pick up the pace. If we maintain this velocity, we will arrive at the train station in exactly 8 minutes. My nutritional supplements await. Wait. My legs. Pain is just weakness leaving the chassis. Move, Izuku-kun. As they sprinted toward the station, shoulder to shoulder, Izuku realized something profound. He wasn't running away from anything anymore. He was running towards something, and for the first time in his life, he wasn't running alone. The weeks bled into months. The routine became the new normal. Month 2, Tensei introduced the impact mitigation training. He threw tennis balls at Izuku while Izuku ran on a treadmill. Then he threw baseballs. Then, eventually, wrenches. If you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a villain. Tensei had laughed, quoting an old pre-quirk movie. Izuku learned to keep his head on a swivel. He learned that the Iida style wasn't just about legs, it was about eyes. Month 3, the sludge villain incident happened. It was a strange, terrifying day. Izuku had been walking home from a grocery run, buying boiled chicken, per Tenya's orders, when he saw the smoke. When he arrived, he saw Bakugo suffocating. He saw the pro-heroes standing around, helpless. And just like before, his legs moved. But this time, he didn't run like a flailing child. Standard operating procedure number 1, if you can breathe you can move. SOP number 4, the environment is your teammate. Izuku sprinted into the fire. When the sludge tendrils lashed out, Izuku didn't scream. He planted his left foot, twisted his hips, and spun under the attack. Low center of gravity. Fluid motion. He grabbed his heavy backpack by the strap. Conservation of momentum. He swung it like a flail, using the centrifugal force to smash it into the sludge villain's eye. Kaken! Breathe! Izuku yelled, pivoting on his heel to dodge another strike. He clawed at the sludge. He didn't win. He couldn't win. He was still just a boy against a monster. But he bought seconds. He bought the distraction needed for All Might to arrive. Later, after the scolding from the heroes, and the quiet, terrified praise from All Might, Izuku walked home. All Might had stopped him. The skeletal man had offered him the world. One for all. The power to be the symbol of peace. It was the dream. It was everything he had ever wanted. But as All Might spoke about vessels and strength, Izuku thought about the gym. He thought about Tensei's laughing wisdom. He thought about Tenya's stern lectures on nutrition. He thought about the engine in his head. All Might, Izuku had said, his voice trembling but firm. I accept. But I have a mentor already. All Might had blinked, surprised. Oh? Who? Ingenium. And, he's teaching me that power isn't just about smashing things. It's about getting there in time to save them. All Might had smiled. A sad, knowing smile. Tenya Iida. A good man. A fast man. You are in good hands, my boy. But this power, it will be the fuel for your engine. Will you take it? Yes, Izuku said. But I'm going to run it my way. Month 8, the beach cleanup, which All Might had insisted on for core strength, was finished early. Not because Izuku was super strong, but because Tenya had shown up one weekend, horrified by the inefficiency of Izuku's lifting technique, and had organized a conveyor belt system using the other neighborhood kids and some spare engine parts. You cannot simply haul trash, Tenya had yelled, directing a group of confused middle schoolers. We must categorize by material density and recycle appropriately. Tensei had watched from the boardwalk, laughing until he cried. Izuku stood on the clean beach, the sunset painting the water gold. His body was different now. He wasn't the bulky tank All Might had originally envisioned. He was leaner. His legs were cords of dense, explosive muscle. His core was tight. He looked like a runner. He looked like a fighter jet stripped of its weapons, built purely for speed. Ready for the exam? Tenya asked, walking up beside him. Tenya had bulked up too, his upper body now matching his legs, his posture less rigid and more athletic. I think so, Izuku said. He looked at his hand. He could feel the hum of one for all deep inside, a stockpile of power he had barely touched. He had promised Tensei he wouldn't use it until he was ready. He told them it was a late bloomer accumulation quirk that needed stress to activate. He clenched his fist. Tenya. Yes? I'm not going to be behind you anymore, Izuku said, turning to face his friend. In the exam. I'm going to race you. Tenya adjusted his glasses. The sunlight glinted off the lenses, hiding his eyes, but his grin was visible. You are welcome to try, Izuku-kun. But do not expect me to use my turn signals. I wouldn't have it any other way. They bumped fists. The engine was idling. The race was about to begin. The concept of fighting had changed for Izuku Midoriya. 3 months ago, fighting was something that happened to him. It was a passive experience, a terrifying inevitability involving bruises, burns, and the bitter taste of dirt. But under the tutelage of Tenya Iida, the definition had shifted. Fighting wasn't about trading blows. It was about geometry. It was about friction coefficients, angular momentum, and the preservation of kinetic energy. Don't be there, Tensei had told him, tapping a wrench against Izuku's forehead for emphasis. That's the secret, kid. When the punch lands, just don't be there. It sounded simple. It was agonizingly difficult. Inside the Iida Estate's gymnasium, the air was thick with the smell of sweat and rubber. Izuku stood in the center of the sparring mat, his chest heaving, his teal tracksuit clinging to his skin. Opposite him stood Tenya Iida. The younger Iida brother was vibrating, literally. His engines were idling at a low rumble, a sound like a purring tiger. He wore protective shin guards and a helmet, looking every bit the high-performance machine his family bred him to be. Combat Simulation 44B, Tenya announced, his voice echoing slightly inside the helmet. Objective, tag the target. Time limit, 2 minutes. Constraints, I am limited to second gear. You are limited to evasion only. Izuku wiped a bead of sweat from his nose. Ready. Commencing. Tenya didn't run, he exploded. Work rack. The sound of air being displaced was sharp. Tenya covered the 10 meters between them in a heartbeat, a blue blur of velocity. He threw a straight right hand, aiming to tap the sensor on Izuku's chest. 3 months ago, Izuku would have flinched. He would have squeezed his eyes shut and braced for impact. Today, he watched Tenya's shoulder, right shoulder drop. Hip rotation. Vector is linear. Izuku didn't jump back. Jumping back was predictable. It kept you on the same line of attack. Instead, Izuku dropped his weight, bending his knees and sliding his left foot out in a wide arc. He pivoted on the ball of his right foot, swinging his body like a gate opening. Tenya's hand punched the empty air where Izuku's chest had been a millisecond before. Too linear, Iida-kun. Izuku gasped, continuing his rotation to circle behind Tenya. Correction noted. Tenya shouted. The engines roared. Tenya slammed his foot down, engaging the air brake technique Izuku had helped him develop. Instead of skidding, Tenya hooked his foot, venting the exhaust sideways to cancel his momentum instantly. He spun, a roundhouse kick sweeping low. This was new. Izuku's eyes widened. He couldn't dodge backward, the wall was there. He couldn't go left, the kick was coming from that side. Up. Izuku jumped. It wasn't a high jump, but it was timed perfectly. He tucked his knees to his chest. Tenya's armored shin passed harmlessly beneath him. As gravity took hold, Izuku didn't just land. He kicked off Tenya's shoulder, gently, using the contact to launch himself over the taller boy's head. He landed in a roll, coming up on his feet 5 meters away. Time! Tensei called out from the sidelines. Tenya froze, his legs still extended in the follow-through of the kick. He slowly lowered his foot and turned to face Izuku. He pulled off his helmet, revealing hair plastered to his forehead and an expression of intense frustration mixed with grudging respect. You used me as a launch pad, Tenya accused, adjusting his glasses. Standard operating procedure number 4, Izuku panted, hands on his knees. The environment is your teammate. You were the environment. Tensei clapped, walking over with water bottles. That's what I'm talking about. That's the hit and run style taking shape. You're not fighting him, Midoriya. You're frustrating him, and a frustrated opponent makes mistakes. Izuku took the water, his hands trembling slightly from the adrenaline. I still can't hit back though. If I had to actually take him down, one step at a time, Tensei ruffled Izuku's hair, which was becoming wilder with every workout. You've got the run part down. The hit part comes when you have the horsepower to back it up. For now, survival is your win condition. Survival. It was a word Izuku was intimate with. But for the first time, it felt like a skill rather than a stroke of luck. The following afternoon, the reality of the outside world crashed back in. School was a different kind of battlefield. Here, there were no padded mats, no referees, and no brotherhood. There was only the suffocating heat of the classroom and the explosive temper of Katsuki Bakugo. Oh, Deku. The voice was low, dangerous. Smoke curled from Bakugo's palms as he cornered Izuku by the lockers. Two of his lackeys stood behind him, snickering. I hear you've been running around town, Bakugo said, leaning in close. People say they see you jogging with some rich kid from the private schools. You think because you found a running buddy, you're suddenly not a pebble? Izuku pressed his back against the cool metal of the lockers. Old habits screamed at him to cower, to apologize, to make himself small. But his legs felt sturdy. He could feel the muscle memory of 1,000 squats, the phantom weight of Tensei's gravity anchors. Distance, 0.5 meters. Threat level high. Escape route. Left flank is blocked by lackey A. Right flank is clear. I'm just training, Kaken, Izuku said. His voice didn't crack. It was quiet but steady. Bakugo's eyes narrowed. He noticed the difference. The Deku from 3 months ago would have been trembling. This Deku was calculating. And that pissed Bakugo off more than the weeping ever did. Training for what? Bakugo slammed his hand against the locker next to Izuku's head. Boom. You're quirkless. You're nothing. You can train until your legs fall off, but you'll never be a hero without power. The smoke cleared. Izuku looked at the scorched metal, then back at Bakugo. Maybe, Izuku said softly. But I have to try. Bakugo recoiled as if he'd been slapped. The sheer audacity of the calm response short-circuited his rage for a split second. Izuku used that second. He didn't push Bakugo. He didn't fight. He simply ducked under Bakugo's arm, a fluid, practiced motion, and stepped into the hallway. See you tomorrow, Kaken, Izuku said, and walked away. He didn't run. He walked. Behind him, Bakugo stood frozen, his hands smoking, confusion warring with fury in his red eyes. The Tatooine shopping district was bustling. The air smelled of exhaust fumes and frying oil. Izuku walked with a slight bounce in his step, reciting the periodic table of elements in his head, a mental exercise Tenya had suggested for maintaining cognitive focus under physical stress. He needed to buy fish. Tenya had sent him a revised meal plan at 3 a.m. titled Omega-3 Fatty Acids and Neuroplasticity, a proposal. Izuku smiled at his phone. He had friends. He had a mentor. He had a future. Boom. The ground shook. Izuku froze. The smile vanished, replaced by the sharp, cold clarity of the zone. Down the street, a plume of smoke rose into the sky. Screams followed. The traffic stopped. People began to run, some away, some toward the spectacle. A villain? Izuku muttered. In the middle of the day? He shouldn't go. He should go home. He should stick to the plan. But heroes don't stick to the plan when people are screaming. Izuku ran. He didn't sprint blindly. He weaved through the crowd, his eyes scanning the rooftops, the alleys, the flow of traffic. He arrived at the scene just as the police were setting up the barricades. It was a nightmare. An alleyway was engulfed in flames. In the center of the inferno, a massive, grotesque entity made of sewage and slime was thrashing around. It had eyes, wild, manic eyes, and a mouth full of jagged, liquid teeth. Don't come any closer. The monster roared, its voice wet and gurgling. I can't get in there. Death Arm shouted, shielding his face from the heat. There's no room to swing. And the fire. I need water. Kamui Woods yelled, hopping between lampposts. I'm a tinderbox here. Where are the fire trucks? Empty Lady was useless, blocked by the narrow street, unable to giant size without crushing civilians. The heroes were gridlocked. They were powerful, yes. But they were specialists in a situation that required generalists. They were waiting for the right conditions. Izuku stood at the police tape, his notebook forgotten in his bag. He stared at the monster. It's fluid, he whispered. Physical strikes will be absorbed. Fire is dangerous because of the methane in the sludge. They need to scatter him, or suffocate the core. Then, the smoke cleared for a moment. Izuku saw it. Buried in the muck, struggling for air, was a face. A familiar face. Blonde, spiky hair. Eyes wide with a terror that Izuku had never seen in them before. Katsuki Bakugo. The boy who had tormented him for a decade. The boy who had told him to dive off a roof. The symbol of Izuku's inadequacy. He was dying. The heroes were waiting. They were talking about bad matchups and waiting for a quirk that fits. Waiting. Tensei's voice rang in Izuku's ears, loud and clear as a bell. We don't wait, kid. We're the engines. If the car stalls, we get out and push. Standard operating procedure number 0. If you can move, you move. Izuku didn't think. Or rather, he thought so fast it looked like instinct. He ducked under the police tape. Hey! Kid! Stop! Death Arms roared. Izuku didn't stop. He accelerated. He sprinted toward the burning alley. The heat hit him like a physical wall, singing his eyebrows, drying his eyes. But he didn't flinch. He focused on the path. Debris on the left. Fire on the right. The villain is center mass, distracted by the explosions Kaken is setting off. The sludge villain saw him. Another meat suit? You're tiny! Get lost! A tendril of sludge, thick as a tree trunk, lashed out. It was fast. Faster than Tenya's practice kicks. But it was sloppy. Izuku saw the telegraphed motion, the gathering of mass before the strike. Drop. Izuku slid on his knees, the asphalt shredding his tracksuit pants. The sludge whipped over his head, the wind of its passage ruffling his hair. He popped up from the slide, momentum carrying him forward. He was 10 feet away now. What? The villain was confused. The insect hadn't been squashed. Izuku reached into his pocket. He didn't have a weapon. He didn't have a gadget. He had a pencil case. A heavy, hard-shell pencil case that Tenya had insisted he buy because it was impact-resistant. Projectile trajectory. Target, the eye. Disorient. Izuku threw it. He didn't throw it like a baseball. He threw it like a shuriken, a snap of the wrist he'd practiced with Tensei for distraction protocols. The case spun through the air and slammed into the villain's bulging, watery eye. Arg! The villain flinched, the sludge retracting instinctively to protect the sensory organ. The grip on Bakugo's mouth loosened. Just for a second. Deku? Bakugo choked out, coughing smoke. Izuku didn't stop. He closed the distance. He leaped over a pile of burning trash and landed right in front of the sludge mass. He didn't punch. Tensei had taught him that punching a liquid was a great way to break your wrist and get stuck. Instead, Izuku grabbed the collar of Bakugo's school uniform with both hands. Pull! Izuku screamed, planting his feet. He dug his heels into the pavement, leaning back with all his weight, using his legs, those legs that had run miles of labyrinth, pressed hundreds of pounds, as anchors. Why are you here? Bakugo shouted, tears streaming down his face. Even facing death, he was angry. Because you looked like you needed help. Izuku screamed back. The villain recovered. The eye healed. The rage returned. You little pest! The sludge rose up, forming a massive wave. It eclipsed the sun. It was going to crush them both. Izuku saw it coming. He knew the geometry. There was no angle of escape. He had anchored himself to pull Bakugo, and now he was stuck. I'm going to die. The thought was surprisingly calm, but I bought 3 seconds. Was it enough? Iida style, evasive maneuver. Failed, Izuku muttered, gritting his teeth and shielding Bakugo with his body. Then, the wind changed. It wasn't a breeze. It was a hurricane. A massive hand, heavy and reassuring, slammed onto Izuku's shoulder. I really am pathetic, a deep voice boomed, vibrating through Izuku's bones. Izuku looked up. Steam poured off the figure standing behind him. Blue eyes glowed within deep, shadowed sockets. Blood trickled from the corner of a smiling mouth. I admonished you for recklessness, All Might said, his voice straining, and yet here I am, watching a quirkless boy teach me what it means to be a hero. The sludge villain screamed and brought the wave down. All Might drew back his fist. He wasn't in his muscular form, not fully. He was half transformed, forcing the power through a broken body by sheer will. Detroit. The punch didn't hit the villain. It hit the air in front of the villain. Smash! The world turned white. The air pressure condensed and exploded. It was like a bomb going off. The sludge was blasted apart, atomized into a rain of sewage. The fire in the alley was snuffed out instantly by the vacuum. The clouds above the city swirled and broke, a sudden updraft creating rain. Izuku felt himself flying backward. He didn't panic. Tuck. Roll. Dissipate impact. He hit the ground, rolling over his shoulder, and skid to a stop. He was covered in slime, his knees were bleeding, and his uniform was ruined. He looked up. All Might stood amidst the scattered remains of the villain, steam rising from his body. The crowd was silent. Then, slowly, the applause began. The aftermath was a blur of noise and flashing lights. The pro-heroes descended. Death Arms and Kamui Woods cornered Izuku. They were angry. They were shouting about vigilantism and suicide missions and interference. Absolutely reckless. You have no quirk. You could have been killed. You made the situation worse. Death Arms poked Izuku in the chest with a massive finger. Izuku stood there, shrinking into himself. He wanted to apologize. He wanted to cry. But then he remembered Tensei, who laughed in the face of danger. Tenya, who cited regulations but always prioritized the objective. Izuku took a deep breath. He straightened his spine. He looked Death Arms in the eye. With all due respect, sir, Izuku said, his voice trembling but audible. The victim was suffocating. The average human can survive roughly 3 minutes without oxygen before permanent brain damage occurs. You had been engaging in perimeter control for 5 minutes. Death Arms blinked. What? Standard operating procedure dictates that preservation of life supersedes quirk licensing protocols in emergency triage situations, Izuku recited, channeling Tenya. I created a distraction vector that allowed the primary heavy hitter, All Might, a clear line of sight. I didn't make it worse. I bought time. The heroes stared at him. This wasn't the sniveling kid they expected. This sounded like a sidekick giving a mission report. He's got a point about the oxygen, Kamui Woods muttered, scratching his bark. Still! Death Arms huffed, though with less heat. Leave it to the pros next time, kid. You got lucky. On the other side of the blockade, Bakugo was being praised for his strong quirk and survival instinct. He looked miserable. He kept glaring at Izuku. When the police finally let them go, the sun was setting. Izuku walked home alone. He was exhausted. Every muscle ached. He needed to call Tensei. He needed to tell him he had failed the don't get hit rule. Deku! Izuku turned. Bakugo was running after him. Here it comes. The explosion. Bakugo stopped a few feet away, panting. He looked furious, shaking. I didn't ask for your help. Bakugo yelled. And you didn't save me. I was fine. You're a quirkless failure who played hero. Don't look down on me. He turned and stomped away. Izuku watched him go. He didn't feel the sting this time. I didn't do it for you, Kaken, Izuku whispered to the empty street. I did it because the engine started. I am here. Izuku jumped a foot in the air as All Might burst out from around a corner, sliding into a pose. All Might? Izuku shrieked. Why are you here? You were surrounded by reporters. I shook them off. All Might laughed, marching forward. Because I am. Poof! A cloud of steam exploded. All Might vanished. In his place stood a skeletal, gaunt man coughing up blood. Aya! Izuku screamed. You deflated. The man wiped the blood from his mouth. Young man, we need to talk. The conversation that followed changed the trajectory of the universe. All Might told him everything. The injury. The limit. The truth about the symbol of peace. He told Izuku that the smile was a mask to hide the fear. I watched you today, All Might said, leaning against the railing. The wind blew through his baggy clothes. The other heroes held back. I held back. But you, timid, quirkless you were the only one who moved. Izuku gripped the straps of his backpack. My legs, they just moved on their own. I didn't think. That, All Might said, pointing a bony finger, is the mark of a true hero. Izuku felt the tears welling up. He had waited his whole life to hear those words from this man, young Midoriya. I have a secret. My quirk, it can be passed on. Izuku's eyes widened. Passed on? One for All Might explained. A cultivation of power. One person stockpiles it, then hands it to the next. I have been looking for a successor. Someone with the heart of a hero. All Might stepped forward, his eyes burning with intensity. You ran into that fire without a power, simply to save a life. You have the heart. I want you to inherit my power. The world stopped. It was the ultimate offer. The golden ticket. The solution to the quirkless problem. With this, he could be like All Might. He could be the greatest. But, Izuku looked down at his shoes. His red sneakers. He thought of the weighted bands in his room. He thought of the whiteboard with mobility written on it. He thought of Tenya Iida, who had looked at a quirkless boy and said, "You've got an engine in your head." Tensei hadn't needed Izuku to have power to believe in him. Tensei had built Izuku up from zero. If Izuku took this power, was he betraying that? Was he admitting that Tensei was wrong, and that you did need a quirk to be a hero? Izuku started. I don't know. All Might blinked, taken aback. You don't know? I have a mentor, Izuku said, his voice thick with emotion. Ingenium. Tenya Iida. He found me a few months ago. He's been training me. He believes I can be a hero without a quirk. He's teaching me to fight with speed and strategy. All Might softened. I see. You feel loyalty to him. If I take your power, Izuku said, looking up, it feels like cheating. Like I'm throwing away everything he taught me. All Might sighed, a gentle, rattling sound. He sat down on the curb, patting the spot next to him. Izuku sat. Young Midoriya, All Might said softly. Think of a car. Ingenium. He is teaching you how to build the chassis. The steering. The brakes. The aerodynamics. He is making you a perfect vessel. All Might tapped Izuku's chest. But a car needs fuel. It needs an engine. Right now you are running on sheer will. That is noble. But the villains we face? They are monsters. One for all, it isn't a replacement for what you've learned. It is the fuel that will let that machine reach its top speed. Izuku absorbed the words. Fuel, Tensei always says. Izuku murmured. Power is nothing without the engine to drive it. Exactly, All Might nodded. You have the engine in your heart and your mind. I am simply offering you the gasoline. You don't have to fight like me. You don't have to be the symbol of peace the way I am. You can be whatever hero you and Ingenium are building. Izuku imagined it. The mobility of the Iidas combined with the raw power of All Might. Not standing still and punching, but moving like a bullet train, hitting like a meteor, a reciprocity that never ended. Izuku stood up. He wiped his tears. Okay, Izuku said. I'll do it. All Might grinned, transforming into his buff form for just a second to give a thumbs up. Excellent. But there is a catch. A catch? You cannot tell anyone about the nature of One for All. Not your mother. Not your friends. Not even Ingenium. Izuku froze. I have to lie to them? It is for their safety, All Might said gravely. This power has a dark history. If people knew you had it, you, and they, would be targets. This was the hardest part. Lying to Tensei. Lying to Tenya. I can't tell them it's transferable, Izuku reasoned, his mind racing. But I can hide the power once I get it. I need a cover story. He paced back and forth. I'll tell them it's a mutation quirk. A late bloomer type. Something that required extreme physical stress to activate. The training, plus the sludge incident. It triggered a dormant stockpile gene. All Might nodded. That is plausible. It happens rarely. Izuku looked at his hands. I hate lying to them. But if it keeps them safe, I'll do it. Then it is settled. All Might stood up. Tomorrow, we begin your vessel preparation. Although, looking at you. All Might squeezed Izuku's shoulder. The muscle was dense, wiry. It seems Ingenium has already done most of the heavy lifting. We might be able to skip the beach cleaning. Actually, Izuku smiled sheepishly. Tenya-kun already cleaned the beach. He organized a recycling drive. All Might laughed, a spray of blood misting the air. Of course he did. The Iida family is intense. That night, Izuku stood in the Iida gym. Tensei and Tenya were waiting. They had seen the news. You idiot! Tenya shouted, rushing forward. He grabbed Izuku by the shoulders and shook him. You absolute, reckless, illogical idiot. You could have died. Did you execute a risk assessment? Did you calculate the survival probability? Tenya's eyes were wet behind his glasses. I'm sorry, Tenya, Izuku said, letting himself be shaken. Tensei walked over. He looked serious. He wasn't smiling. Midoriya, Tensei said quietly. You broke protocol. You engaged a villain without a license and without backup. I know, Izuku said. Why? Because he couldn't breathe, Izuku said. And because I knew the angle. Tensei stared at him for a long moment. Then, he sighed and pulled Izuku into a hug. The armor was cold, but the embrace was warm. You scared the hell out of me, kid, Tensei whispered. But good throw with the pencil case. They pulled apart. Tenya was wiping his glasses furiously. I have something to tell you guys, Izuku said. His heart hammered against his ribs. This was the first lie. What is it? Tensei asked. During the fight, when I pulled Kaken, I felt something. Something hot. In my stomach. Izuku clenched his fist, mimicking the sensation All Might described. And afterwards, I felt different, stronger. He looked them in the eye. I think the stress triggered something. The doctor said it was impossible, but maybe I'm a late bloomer. A stockpile quirk. It feels like energy. Tenya stopped wiping his glasses. Tensei went still. A quirk? Tenya whispered. You developed a quirk? I don't know how to control it yet, Izuku said quickly. It feels dangerous. Like it breaks things. Tensei looked at Izuku. He studied his face. Izuku held his breath. Then Tensei grinned. It was a wide, toothy grin. Well, Tensei slapped Izuku on the back, nearly knocking him over. Looks like we ordered a scooter and got a sports car delivered by mistake. A stockpile quirk? That's heavy. That's torque. But brother, Tenya frowned. If he has a power-type quirk, does that change the training? Should he switch to strength training? Tensei looked at Izuku. He saw the power humming under the surface. But he also saw the boy who had analyzed the ricochet path in 3 seconds. No, Tensei said firmly. We don't change a thing. He pointed at the whiteboard. Mobility. It doesn't matter how much horsepower you have under the hood, Midoriya. If you can't steer, you crash. We stick to the plan. We teach you how to drive this new engine the Iida way. Izuku felt a massive weight lift off his chest. He smiled, tears spilling over again. Yes, sir. Now Tensei checked his watch. You survived a villain attack. That deserves a reward. Tenya, order the pizzas. Extra cheese. Don't tell Mom. Brother. Tenya scandalized. The sodium content. Do it. As the three of them bickered over toppings, Izuku looked at his hand. The power of All Might was waiting for him. But looking at Tenya and Tensei, he knew one thing for sure. He wouldn't become All Might 2.0. He would become something faster. The morning of the UA High School entrance exam was crisp and cold, the kind of February morning that bit at your cheeks and demanded you keep moving. For Izuku Midoriya, moving was the operative word. He stood at the shoreline of Dagoba Municipal Beach Park. It was unrecognizable from the trash heap it had been 10 months ago. Now, it was pristine sand, glittering under the rising sun, but Izuku wasn't looking at the view. He was looking at Tenya Iida, who was holding a clipboard and a whistle. Time check, 0600 hours. Tenya barked, his breath puffing in the cold air. The exam orientation begins at 0900. We have exactly 1 hour for a final systems check before we must initiate transit protocols to ensuring arrival with a 30-minute buffer. Right, Izuku breathed, bouncing on the balls of his feet. He looked different. The scrawny, trembling boy was gone. In his place stood a teenager made of whipcord muscle and nervous energy. He wore a custom-made compression suit under his tracksuit, a gift from Tensei. It was black with teal piping, reinforced at the joints to help dissipate shock. But the most striking addition was on his legs. They weren't full armor like Ingenium's, but they were the prototypes. Impact dampeners, Mark V. Sleek, white greaves that clamped around his shins and ankles, containing hydraulic pistons designed to absorb recoil. Tensei had scavenged them from his own old gear and modified them for a non-engine user. Let's test the output. Tensei's voice came from the portable speaker sitting on a bench. The Turbo Hero couldn't be there in person, duty called in Hosu, but he was watching via a video call. Remember, Midoriya. You've got the fuel now. But don't flood the engine. Feather the throttle. Feather the throttle, Izuku repeated. 1 for all 5%. He closed his eyes. He felt the hum of the power All Might had given him just that morning. It was a terrifying, roaring ocean inside him. If he let it all out, he would explode. He knew that. All Might had warned him. Your body is a vessel. If you pour too much water into a cup, it spills. If you pour too much power, you break. But Tensei had taught him how to handle torque. Izuku visualized the power not as a smash, but as a current. He let it flow down his spine, into his hips, and down into his legs. Green sparks crackled around his calves, dancing over the white armor. Go! Tenya blew the whistle. Izuku vanished. Sand exploded into glass shards where he had stood. He wasn't running. He was skipping across the surface tension of the world. The world blurred. The wind roared. He hit the end of the beach, planted his foot on a concrete retaining wall, and turned. Snap! The force of the turn was immense. Usually, his ankle would have twisted. But the greaves hissed, puffed, absorbing the lateral G-force. The hydraulic pistons compressed and fired back, launching him out of the turn without losing speed. Current velocity, 60 kilometers per hour. Tenya shouted, checking a radar gun. Cornering efficiency at 92%. Izuku sprinted back, the green lightning trailing behind him like the tail of a comet. He skidded to a halt in front of Tenya, kicking up a spray of sand that Tenya deftly blocked with a clipboard. How did it feel? Tensei asked over the speaker. Izuku looked down at his hands. They were shaking, but not from fear. From excitement. It felt smooth. The armor took the bite out of the turn. I didn't feel like my bones were going to snap. Good, Tensei said. That's the gear doing its job. But listen to me, kid. The exam isn't a track meet. There are going to be variables. Robots. Other students. Debris. Don't get tunnel vision. Speed kills, but only if you hit a wall. I know, Izuku nodded. Tenya stepped forward and placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder. The two of them looked like a match set, one blue and rigid, one green and vibrating, but both carved from the same stone of discipline. We have prepared for this, Tenya stated firmly. We have studied the past exams. We have conditioned our bodies. We have optimized our diets. There is no statistical reason for failure. Izuku smiled. Unless there's a written test on pop culture. Tenya looked horrified. Was that on the syllabus? I did not study pop culture. Izuku laughed, the tension breaking. I'm joking, Tenya. Come on. Let's go to UA. The gates of UA High School were massive, a symbol of the barrier between the ordinary and the extraordinary. Hundreds of students were streaming in, a sea of black uniforms and nervous chatter. Izuku and Tenya walked side by side. They drew attention. Tenya walked with a marching cadence, his height and stern expression making people part ways. Izuku walked with a silent, prowling grace, his eyes scanning the crowd, analyzing quirks automatically. Giant hands. Emitter type? Probably telekinesis. That guy has a tail. Ojiro, martial arts potential. That girl is invisible, stealth specialist. Out of my way, Deku. The voice was a growl. Bakugo shoved past them, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. He glared at Izuku, then at Tenya. And you, Four Eyes? Don't think hanging out with a reject makes you special. I'm going to crush both of you, Tenya bristled. Bakugo. Unprovoked hostility is unbecoming of a hero candidate. Furthermore, shoving in a crowded walkway is a safety hazard. Shut up, Bakugo sneered, but he kept walking. He didn't explode. He seemed focused. He knew Izuku wasn't the same punching bag anymore, and that bothered him more than he admitted. Ignore him, Izuku said quietly. He's just revving his engine. His engine runs on spite, Tenya huffed, adjusting his glasses. They reached the entrance to the orientation hall. Izuku stopped. This is it, he whispered. Indeed, Tenya nodded. I will see you on the other side, Midoriya-kun. Let us meet at the top of the leaderboard. Yeah. Top of the board. As they separated to find their assigned seats, Izuku tripped. It was a classic Midoriya moment. His toe caught on a loose tile. Gravity, his old enemy, reached up to claim him. SLP-1, if you can breathe you can move. He didn't face plant. As he fell, he tucked his chin. He was about to execute a roll when he felt himself stop in midair. Are you okay? Izuku floated. He looked around. A girl with a round face and brown bobbed hair was touching his shoulder. I stopped you with my quirk, she smiled brightly. It's bad luck to fall before the exam, right? She released him, and he landed softly on his feet. Thanks. Izuku stammered, blushing. Zero gravity. Touch activation. Removes mass. Incredible utility for rescue and mobility. I'm Uraraka Ochako. She beamed. Good luck. She walked away. Izuku stood there, stunned. I talked to a girl. And I didn't die. Maybe Tensei was right. Maybe things were turning around. The written exam was brutal, but fair. Izuku breezed through it. Tenya had forced him to memorize quadratic equations during planking sessions. Then came the orientation. Present Mike, the voice hero, screamed at them about robots. 3 pointers. 2 pointers. 1 pointers. And the 0 pointer. Izuku sat next to Bakugo, unlucky seating arrangement, frantically taking notes. Robots. Standard mechanids. Weak points likely at the joints and sensor arrays. Speed will be effective, but durability is an issue. My kicks need to be precise. Excuse me, a hand shot up in the dark auditorium. It was Tenya. Of course it was Tenya. I have a question. Tenya shouted, the spotlight swinging to him. The handout lists 4 types of villains, but you only discussed 3. If this is a printing error, it is a stain on the reputation of UA. And you. Tenya spun around and pointed a rigid finger directly at Izuku, the student with the curly hair. You have been muttering this entire time. It is distracting. If you are not taking this seriously, please leave. The auditorium went silent. Izuku shrank into his seat, his face burning. Tenya, why? We're friends. But he knew why. Tenya was stressed. When Tenya was stressed, he reverted to strict adherence to rules and order. He wasn't trying to be mean. He was trying to control the chaos. Okay. Examinee 7111. Present Mike waved his hands. The 4th robot is a gimmick. A 0 pointer. Just an obstacle. Avoid it. Izuku wrote that down. Like an oil slick on the track. Don't engage. After the orientation, in the changing rooms, Tenya found Izuku. Midoriya-kun, Tenya said stiffly, looking at the lockers. I apologize for the outburst. My anxiety levels regarding the exam integrity are elevated. Izuku pulled on his leg greaves, locking the hydraulic clamps with a satisfying click hiss. It's okay, Tenya. I was muttering. I know you hate that. Izuku stood up and jumped twice, testing the seals. You were just enforcing the speed limit. Tenya looked relieved. He saw the armor on Izuku's legs. Those are the Mark Versus? Yeah. They're ready. Good. Tenya slammed his locker shut. We are in different battle centers. Center B for me, Center A for you. They separated us to prevent cooperation. Makes sense, Izuku nodded. They want to see our individual specs. Show them, Tenya said, his eyes burning behind his glasses. Show them the Iida style. I will. Battle Center B. The gates were massive. A mock city stretched out behind them, a sprawling urban jungle of concrete and steel. Izuku stood in the crowd of examinees. He stood out. Not because he was big, but because he was vibrating. He was doing dynamic stretches, high knees, lunges, hip rotations. The other students looked nervous, checking their gear or psyching themselves up. Among them was Uraraka, looking terrified. Izuku wanted to go say hi to reassure her, but his throat went dry. Focus. The engine is cold. Warm it up. He closed his eyes. One for all. He reached for the power. It was easier now than it had been at the beach. The adrenaline of the exam acted as a catalyst. He pulled the energy up, letting it flood his veins. Full cal 5%. Green lightning crackled faintly around his body, mostly hidden by his tracksuit, but visible as static discharge around his metal greaves. His hair stood up slightly. Start. Present mixed voice boomed from the tower. What are you waiting for? There are no countdowns in real battles. Run! Before the other students could even process the command, there was a boom of displaced air. They looked forward. The gate was empty. A trail of dust was settling in the entryway. Izuku was already gone. The city. Izuku was a blur. The mock city was perfect. It was exactly like the labyrinth Tensei had built, but bigger. SCP-4. The environment is your teammate. A one-pointer, a wheeled drone with a machine gun, rolled out of an alleyway. Target acquired. It didn't even finish the sentence. Izuku didn't punch it. He didn't stop. He was running at 50 kilometers per hour. He saw the robot, calculated the angle, and jumped. He ran along the wall of the building next to it. As he passed over the robot, he pushed off the wall, driving his right leg down like a piston. Impact. His heel, reinforced by the white armor, smashed into the robot's sensor head. Crunch. The hydraulic dampeners hissed, absorbing the shock that would have shattered a normal ankle. The robot crumpled into scrap metal. Izuku used the recoil to bounce off the wreckage and back into a sprint. 1 point, he whispered, not breaking stride. He turned a corner. 2 3-pointers, massive, tank-treaded behemoths, were blocking the road. Target! They droned, raising missile launchers. Izuku smiled. Too slow. He channeled OFA into his legs. Kick it up to 8% for the burst. He didn't run away. He ran at them. Just as the missiles fired, Izuku slid. He dropped to his knees, the smooth plating of his greaves sparking against the asphalt. He slid under the missiles, which exploded harmlessly against the building behind him. He slid right between the two robots. As he passed, he lashed out with both legs in a split kick, the Iida scissor. His armored feet slammed into the inner tracks of the robots. The force derailed the treads. The robots groaned, their gears stripping, and they collapsed inward, colliding with each other. 6 points. He popped up from the slide and kept moving. Up in the observation room, the judges were watching the screens. Who is that in Center B? Midnight asked, licking her lips. He moves like a cat. Candidate Midoriya, Snipe noted, checking a file. Quirk listed as superpower? Late bloomer. But he fights like a speedster. He's using parkour. Eraserhead Aizawa murmured from the back of the room, his eyes narrowing. He's not wasting energy on destruction. He's disabling them. Efficient. He reminds me of Ingenium, Cementos noted. All Might, standing in the corner, swelled with pride. That's it, young Midoriya. Drive it like you stole it. Back in the city, the numbers were climbing. Izuku was in the zone. The world was slowing down. 12 points. 25 points. 38 points. He wasn't the strongest. There were kids blowing up buildings, melting steel, throwing tanks. But Izuku was everywhere. He was stealing kills simply by getting there first. He saw a laser-shooting villain bot targeting a boy with a naval laser, Aoyama. The boy was clutching his stomach. Izuku wall-jumped off a lamppost, grabbed a hanging traffic light, swung around it to build momentum, and launched himself feet first into the robot's chest. Smash! The robot flew backward. 45 points. Are you okay? Izuku shouted over his shoulder. Merci! Aoyama gasped. You sparkle with speed! Izuku was already gone. The The zero-pointer. The buzzer was nearing. Izuku had 58 points. That was safe. That had to be safe. He was panting now, sweat stinging his eyes. The 5% output was taxing his stamina, and the hydraulic pistons in his greaves were running hot, hissing steam with every step. I need to cool down. I need to, rumble. The ground jumped. Buildings shook. Windows shattered. From the central plaza, a shadow eclipsed the sun. The zero-pointer. It was colossal. A mechanical god that towered over the skyscrapers. Its hand, the size of a bus, smashed into a building, sending debris raining down. Run! Someone screamed. The students broke. The hero candidates turned into terrified children. They scrambled away, pushing past each other. Izuku froze. SLP for zero-pointer, avoid. It's an obstacle. There are no points. His brain screamed at him to run. His legs twitched, ready to engage the retreat protocol. Turn around. Go to the exit. You pass. But then he heard it. Ouch. It was a small sound, buried under the roar of collapsing concrete. But Izuku heard it. He looked back. Uraraka Ochako was trapped. A piece of rubble had pinned her leg. She was struggling, her face pale with dust and terror. The zero-pointer was looming over her, its massive tracks grinding the pavement, getting closer. The other students were gone. She's going to die. The thought was clinical. Mathematical. Distance to target, 40 meters. Distance of robot, 20 meters. Closing speed of robot, 5 meters per second. If he ran away, he survived. If he helped, he risked everything. Tensei's voice. We don't wait for the green light when someone is on the tracks. All Might's voice. The essence of a hero is meddling where you don't belong. Tenya's voice. Maximum efficiency. Izuku's engine roared. He didn't run away. He turned toward the Titan. One for all, 100%. He screamed internally. No. Wait. If he used 100%, he would shatter his legs. If he shattered his legs, he couldn't carry her. If he couldn't carry her, they both died. Don't flood the engine. Just redline it. Shift up. Izuku yelled aloud. He pushed the power past the safety limit. 10%. 15%. 20%. The pain was immediate. His muscles screamed as the fibers tore. The green lightning turned wild, arcing off him like a Tesla coil. The white armor on his legs began to crack under the pressure of his own flexed muscles. SOP-7, impact is just energy transfer. Izuku launched himself. He didn't jump high, he jumped forward. He hit the ground, sprinting. Every step cracked the asphalt. He was moving faster than he ever had in his life. He was a green streak. He reached Uraraka in a heartbeat. Hold on. He didn't try to lift the rubble. That was too slow. He kicked the rubble. Smash! He delivered a lateral roundhouse kick to the concrete slab, pinning her. The 20% power combined with the hydraulic assist shattered the rock into pebbles. Uraraka gasped, her leg free. Can you move? Izuku screamed, the zero-pointer's shadow falling over them. My ankle! She cried. The robot's hand was coming down. It was going to crush them. Izuku looked up. He couldn't outrun the hand. It was too wide. I have to deflect it. He looked at his legs. The armor was smoking. The check engine light in his brain was flashing red. Iida style, recipro burst. But he didn't have engines. He had one for all. Izuku grabbed Uraraka and threw her, gently as he could, toward a safe alcove. Stay there. Then, he jumped. He jumped straight up, toward the descending hand. Don't punch. Kicks have more mass. More leverage. He chambered his right leg. He focused every ounce of OFA into his foot. The white greave glowed, the metal groaning. Detroit. He spun in the air, adding centrifugal force to the vertical thrust. Axe. His heel collided with the center of the zero-pointer's palm. Boom. The impact was deafening. The air pressure exploded outward, shattering the windows of every building in a 3-block radius. The robot's hand stopped. Then, metal screamed. The force of the kick buckled the wrist joint. The shockwave traveled up the arm, blowing out pistons and gears. The massive robot tilted backward, its internal gyroscope failing. It crashed onto its back with an earth-shaking thud. Izuku hovered in the air for a split second, the dust swirling around him. Then, gravity took over, he fell. Legs broken? He looked down. His right leg was purple. The white armor was shattered, hanging off him in scraps. The hydraulic fluid was leaking out, mixing with blood. He hit the ground. He tried to roll, but his leg wouldn't cooperate. He tumbled, slamming into the pavement. Gah! He cried out, clutching his leg. The dust settled. The buzzer sounded. Time's up. Silence descended on Battle Center B. Slowly, students began to creep back out of hiding. They stared at the fallen giant. They stared at the boy lying in the wreckage of his own gear. Did he just kick that thing over? He jumped like 50 feet in the air. Is he dead? Midoriya! Uraraka crawled out from the alcove, ignoring her own pain. She reached him. Midoriya! Are you okay? Izuku opened his eyes. He stared at the sky. My armor. He wheezed. Tensei is going to kill me. Those were prototypes. The aftermath. Recovery girl was not amused. You shattered the tibia and the fibula, she scolded, kissing Izuku's forehead. And the muscle fibers are shredded. What kind of quirk is this? It's like your body can't handle your own horsepower. It's a work in progress, Izuku mumbled, feeling the stamina drain out of him as his bones knit together. He walked out of the infirmary an hour later, exhausted, bandaged, and carrying a bag of scrap metal that used to be his leg guards. Tenya was waiting for him at the gate. Tenya looked pristine. His uniform was dusty, his glasses were slightly crooked, but he was uninjured. Midoriya-kun! Tenya marched over. His face was a mask of concern. I heard the explosion from Center A. Rumors are circulating of a student who decapitated the zero-pointer. Was that you? I didn't decapitate it, Izuku said tiredly. I just tripped it. Really hard. Tenya looked at the bag of broken armor. He looked at Izuku's limp. You broke the mark versus. Yeah. And your leg? Yeah. Tenya sighed, taking the bag from Izuku's shoulder to carry it himself. Inefficient. Tenya shook his head, but his voice was soft. Highly inefficient. However, Tenya looked back at the school. You saved the girl, didn't you? Izuku nodded. Tenya smiled. It was a proud smile. Then the equipment served its purpose. My brother will be pleased. But he will definitely bill you for the repairs. I know, Izuku groaned. Come, Tenya said, offering his arm for support. Let us go get Katsudan. I believe you have earned a cheat day. Izuku's eyes widened. Really? No boiled chicken? Just this once, Tenya conceded. But tomorrow, we double the calcium intake. 1 week later, Izuku sat in his living room, staring at the envelope. Inko was pacing in the kitchen, muttering faster than Izuku ever had. He tore it open. A holographic disc fell out. All Might appeared. I am here. As a projection. The projection explained the scoring. Villain points, 58. A solid score. Enough to pass. But wait. There is more. The video shifted. It showed Uraraka in the judge's room, pleading for them to give her points to Izuku. He saved me. He jumped when everyone else ran. All Might wiped a tear from his eye. A hero's job is to save people. Rescue points. The scoreboard appeared. Izuku Midoriya, villain points 58, rescue points 60 is equal to 118 points. Welcome, young Midoriya. To your hero academia, Izuku cried. He cried so hard he dehydrated himself. But then, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Tenya. Image attached, a scoreboard. 1. Bakugo Katsuki, 77 villains/0 rescue. 2. Kirishima Aijiro, 39 villains/35 rescue. 3. Midoriya Izuku, 58 villains/60 rescue. 4. Iida Tenya, 52 villains/9 rescue. Text, I admit defeat. You are higher on the board. However, note that my efficiency ratio was superior as I sustained 0 damage. We will settle this in the sports festival. Congratulations, Izuku. Izuku smiled, clutching the phone. He was in. They were both in. Team Ingenium had arrived at UA.